Smashing through the glass ceiling. It's what women who get to the top in male-dominated professions are often described as having done. But what do women need to do to compete in a man's world? And should they do it on their own or with a little help? Susanna Mendonça has been finding out.
Football and politics. They're both male-dominated areas where women try to level the playing field. And this woman has done a bit of both. She used to play football and now combines working at this youth club in London's Tower Hamlets with being a Labour politician in Essex. She says to succeed in a man's world, women need confidence.
There have been so many times over the last 20 years when I've been on a pitch, all men, or even at a football tournament, and it's all men, and I have to believe that I have enough ability to play in that tournament, you know, does that make sense? And so, and in some ways that seems like a small thing, but then you take that into politics, and again, you know, you walk into Westminster, fairly male-dominated, it's getting better, and you have to believe that you have a contribution to bring, that you've got, you know, a voice to bring.
While the number of women in football and politics is growing, there are still 13 men for every woman taking part in football, and as for politics, around just 1 in 5 MPs is a woman. A short distance from this youth centre is another place where women are in short supply. Last year, just 15% of board directors on FTSE 100 companies were women, compared with 12.5% in 2010. So the number of women getting to the top of financial firms has increased, but it's not happening quickly enough, according to this former market analyst who's worked for the likes of BGC and Goldman Sachs.
There has been very, very little improvement. Women are still massively underrepresented. I kind of think we have got to the stage now when quotas are necessary, where that kind of force has to happen. And in 10 years' time, when we have lots of women running the world, then we don't need quotas anymore.
The Prime Minister's made clear that he'd prefer to avoid quotas as a way of getting more women onto company boards, and he's been resisting calls from Brussels for a 40% female quota.
And there are women who'd agree with the no-quota approach.
I think when you're talking about quotas, positive discrimination, what you're really talking about is tokenism. And that dents women's self-confidence, it stokes male resentment, and it creates a professional culture where suspicion is the norm. And that is bad for everybody concerned.
But this Labour parliamentary candidate, who was selected on an all-women shortlist in Harlow, says quotas are needed.
If you ever want to address any kind of balance, whether it be women or whether it be working class people in politics, you have to do it in a purposeful way. You can't just, you know, give it good words and dream about it and one day think, you know, a few years down the line it will change. That's not how change happens.
But things have been changing. Women have been rising through the ranks. So do they need a leg up to speed up the process, or should they just be playing men at their own game?
I'm joined now by Mike Buchanan from the Campaign for Merit in Business. Before I come to you, Mike, can I ask you first of all, Heather Rabbatts, I mean, what's it like being the only female director at the FA?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I am also the only female director on some of the other boards I sit on. We all know that football has a particular reputation in terms of whether it has the most modern outlook to women. But I think the fact that I am on the board of the FA is a sign that, you know, times are changing.
Do you think they are? I mean, is it tough? How are you treated as a woman on those boards?
It is tough. Oh, it's always a mix, you know. There are people who are incredibly welcoming. There are others who are somewhat suspicious, and that I think that's true of most boardrooms that women go into, whether they are in football or a top 100 PLC. There's always a challenge. I think women invariably have to work often twice as hard to find that way of being accepted, because they don't go in with being given the benefit of the doubt. I think actually to have quotas would make it worse for women. You'd have that sticker on your forehead, which is, I'm only here because I'm part of the 40% or 30% quota.
So how do you change it?
I think you change it by some of the work that's been done recently about constant exhortation, about putting companies on notice that we expect them to change, about chairmen being asked very serious questions by their shareholders and at AGMs about why there are no women on their boards. And I think, you know, as we were talking earlier, I think at times maybe the threat of quotas, the threat of change, might get everybody to focus in the course of the next few years about what they need to do.
Mike Buchanan, do you agree that we need more women on boards of FTSE 100, 250 companies?
No, I don't.
Why?
Well, we have 5 longitudinal studies which show that when you increase the number of women on boards, financial performance declines. There is not one single longitudinal study worldwide which shows...
What about Women Matter 2010, a report by management consultancy McKinsey that suggested that companies with gender-balanced executive boardrooms are 56% more profitable than all-male boards?
We keep hearing this, and if you actually look at the original McKinsey reports or Credit Suisse reports, you'll find that they say that they're reporting correlation.
But how have they done these reports when there aren't that many boards with women on them?
Well, there's plenty of them. There's plenty of them. In Norway, there was a huge expansion in the number of women on corporate boards, and the result was corporate decline. And in fact, the reason that men dominate corporate boardrooms is, the reasons are very well understood, and the most important single reason was something that was explained by Catherine Hakim, a renowned sociologist, back in 2000, and her research showed that while 4 in 7 men are work-centred, only 1 in 7 women are. So you would expect an 80-20 split on corporate boards on that alone.
What do you say to that, Heather Rabbatts?
I'm not aware of some of the longitudinal surveys that have just been mentioned. I always find it quite interesting where we look at board effectiveness, and we were talking earlier about the economy and why we got into some of the mess. Some people would argue it was about how banks were governed. When we look at failing companies, we look at process, we look at lack of regulation. We don't necessarily look at the fact that they were all male or fundamentally male boards. So I don't know about that longitudinal survey. I'm somewhat sceptical about it.
But women are not work-centred enough that...
I think that, as you look at the indices, women are participating more in the economy, they're working longer. Certainly women might not be work-centred through certain times of their career when they're having young families, but when I talk to women across all sectors, one of the things that they constantly come back to is that, A, they want to come back to work. Most of them will increasingly need to stay in work in order to support their families. So I think all of those indices are changing. And also it's about age and stage. Most non-execs are in their 50s and 60s when they have had experience. I agree with you, having experience and wisdom is important to be a non-exec. Well, actually, you'll find that many women are wanting to be back in the labour market during those years.
What about there? I mean, there are 2 points there. I mean, you could argue, maybe a bit crudely, that it was men that broke it, the banking system, that those boards were male-dominated and that they took too many risks, and a mix, having women perhaps who, as a generality, are more risk-averse, add a different dimension, would be healthy and profitable.
Well, it's a theory, of course, but it's also a self-serving theory.
Is it, though?
Like
It was borne out, though, wasn't it?
Well, there's a very interesting...
A bit like your longitudinal surveys are self-serving to your perspective, which is to argue that actually women can't get on board until I don't know what sort of experience they might need to have.
There are no longitudinal studies which say that performance improves, and in fact there's a Deutsche Bundesbank longitudinal study which shows, and Deutsche Bundesbank voluntarily, and it reports on the German banking system where they voluntarily put more women onto their boards, and the result was more risky behaviour. It wasn't less risky.
All right, we can argue about surveys one way or t'other, but do you not feel it's right that there should be more women on boards? 50% of the population are female. Why shouldn't there be more women if they want to be and want to have a role on boards? Why shouldn't they be there?
I don't think any men feel that just because they want to be on a board there's some sort of entitlement. I think at the end of the day...
I think some would argue they do, actually.
Well, very few. But at the end of the day, we come back to the point that the number of qualified men for major corporate boards hugely outnumbers the number of qualified women. And that's why the last 24 or 25 FTSE 100 directors appointed have been non-executive.
Right, but there is a rule that says that men appoint men, that the reason that boards have stayed male is because they want to have similar people to themselves on the boards.
Again, it's a self-serving theory. The reason that they do that is that the pool of men is hugely deeper than the pool of women.
What do you say to that? That doesn't stand up, that point, that actually they just pick other men like themselves?
I think there's been all sorts of research that says in the past that people tend to recruit in their own image. And when we've looked at issues of discrimination, be it based on gender and race, those points have been made. I think what I would like to stress is that, as you said, that there's 50% of the population of women. There are huge numbers of talented women out there. I think increasingly, actually, boards are wanting to have people with diverse voices and diverse experiences. Having people who've just come up through one particular part of the industry to then become a non-exec doesn't necessarily give you that breadth of outlook that you want to have as non-execs. And I think if you start to look at the criteria which make about effective non-execs and think about what the talent pool you want to look at, you will start to find more women coming onto boards.
But we always have cherry picking. We always have 50% of the population as women, so why aren't 50% of directors of FTSE 100 companies?
Well, I don't think anyone's arguing for 50%.
No, but
it's only 15% at the moment.
But I don't see anyone campaigning for 50% of lorry drivers to be women.
What do you say to that?
Well, I'm sure if women want to be lorry drivers, they will also apply, and no doubt they will be put up with some of the challenges of getting into lorry driving. What we're talking about here, however, is power. What we're talking about here is power. And actually, most people give up power with great difficulty. This is about ensuring that power, whether it's around effective decision-making around our companies, has the best possible talent. And my belief is that when I, meet many women, they say we would really like to become a non-exec. We don't have the confidence. We don't know how to do it. I don't find the same comments that I get from some of my male colleagues who do feel, the next thing I'm going to do is become a non-exec.
All right.
So I think we need to support women to find that voice, as some of your films suggested earlier.
Mike Buchanan, thank you very much
for
coming in,
Joe.
and thank you, Heather Rabbatts, for being our guest of the day.